Amanda here. I've got 4 primary-aged children and I'm currently in the process of home educating them here in the UK. This is part 3 of a series of videos on history. The first one looked at why it's so important to me, why I get fired up about it. The second video shared the first 5 ways that I learn history along with my children, because we're all in this one together. And today I'm just going to share with you the other 5 ways that we are learning history. Some of it's not intentional, I just have noticed that it's happening. And so it's just really encouraging when you can stop back and go, look at all the history they're soaking up without even really realizing it. So let's get into it. Living history novels. Okay, so my children love reading, they just are always wanting to read, and so I'm deliberately putting books in front of them that are not just a great story, but are set in a time period that's going to bring the history to life. So an example of what I mean, here are some books that my children have loved which have taught them history without them realizing it. So one of my daughters has read almost all these books in the series, My Story. I picked a big bunch of these up from a charity shop for like 20p each, and they're really, really good. Here's another one, Slave Girl. We've got about 10 in this series. So this book, Black Horses for the King, this is set in the Middle Ages, and it just brings that whole time period to life. This one is set in medieval times, The Door on the Wall. Listening for Lions, I read this book to my daughters. This was set in Kenya and then in the UK, kind of in the Victorian times. So both those geographic locations were really brought to life. And so, you know, the description of the geography, of the sounds, of the smells, of the clothing, all that was just implicit in the imagination that was formed. So this book just really caused you to imagine what it was like to walk the streets at that time period. Another one of the My Story series, this is the Mayflower, again to do with Britain and America. One of my daughters really enjoyed this, The Samurai's Tale. So this was set in Japan and really helped bring Japanese history to life, just to be able to imagine. Try and imagine yourself in that place in that time period. Okay, so one of my daughters loves this series. It's the Roman Mysteries. Again, we've got about 10 of these books, all set in ancient Rome. She's learned a lot about ancient Rome from these books. Calico Captive here. This one is set in America in the 1700s, based on a true story. So this book was set in medieval England. It's a bit like a diary, and so she's just describing everything from how everyone's dressed to what they're eating to the customs, and all that is just woven into the plot. Last one, The Shakespeare Stealer. So this book is set in Elizabethan England. It's a bit of a story about someone wanting to steal one of Shakespeare's plays. So again, it's just a novel, but it's set in a historical time period, and the historical details are all factually true, even though the plot is made up. So that's just some of the books in our library. The Ambleside Online curriculum has a really good list of books that help that sort of thing. Some of those books are from that list, and others I've just picked up through my own research and borrowed from friends, that sort of thing. Okay, so another thing we do is we've been a bit ad hoc with this, but come September, once we've had a bit of a break and we start a bit more seriously, we're going to pick this up with a bit more focus, is really taking each term to pick a different composer and a different artist to study. So we've already done Bach, Handel and Vivaldi, because they were all part of the Baroque period, and so they put it in the Book of Centuries, you know, when was Bach born and when did he die, and crossing over with Handel. So we're studying music history, trying to just track the development of sound a little bit as well. And also some art history. So the first, I'm not going to manage to do this one completely chronologically, but we're going to start with Michelangelo and just really soak ourselves in his paintings and his work. The point of that is not to teach history, it is to teach art appreciation and the ability to really study a picture, but automatically they'll just be learning some history of art as we go. Okay, something else I'm going to try and do, and again this is a Charlotte Mason idea, is to learn some old folk songs. And the idea behind learning folk songs is to really start to understand, what did people generations ago sing, what does that tell us about what they struggled with, what they enjoyed. It's just a really good way of learning about them. Learning folk songs just helps put you in, empathise with people who lived hundreds of years ago, and it teaches you about what it was like to live then, what their struggles were, what their hopes were. I've got a resource to help me with folk songs. I'll try and track that down and put a link in the description for you if that interests you. Okay, another really important way is getting out of the house, going to places where history happened, and that is one thing that Britain's amazing for. It's one of the main reasons we decided to take them out of school for a period of time initially anyway, is because life was just chugging on and we were so busy and we didn't have time to really put in our diary to go and see Shakespeare's Globe or to go to the Tower of London, and I just didn't want years to go by and never get around to doing it. So I try and almost dedicate a whole day a week if I can to going out and seeing what's out there in terms of history. We've been to some great museums, art galleries, National Trust, English Heritage, all that sort of thing. Also local history, getting out and about. Where we live in Kent, there's something called Wheels of Time initiative, and so we've been to a few local museums. They're just like small ones, but they teach you about local history, and I think it's really important to learn that as well, not just the big sweep of human history, but what happened where I live. So just about 200 meters from where we live is a really important historical site, and would you believe it, we lived here 10 years and just had never got around to going, even though it was only 200 meters away. It wasn't until we were home educating and a group that we belong to, or we've hooked up with, they organised a trip, so we jumped in and said, yes, we're coming on this trip. So we actually had a kind of bespoke tour of this great historical place with a big group of other children and families. But that just was down the road. We just hadn't had time, but we're making time for it now. Copy work is one of the main ways that I'm actually beginning to work on teaching writing. Again, this is a key tenet of a Charlotte Mason approach, is to get children to copy out high quality pieces of writing so that they learn the spelling, punctuation, grammar, and also just learn how sentences are structured by copying and writing out by hand, quality writing as well as just reading it. And so I've got my children to write out some of speeches by Churchill when we looked at some World War II last year. I'm definitely going to get them to copy out some key things from like the Bill of Rights and the Magna Carta, from the Treaty of Waitangi in New Zealand. And so there will be some documents which have really historical significance, which at some point they will sit down and they will write out by hand. And I'm hoping that that process of engaging with it slowly will just cause some of it to sink in. So that is the end of my 10 ways that we are learning history. You may think that history is the only thing we learn, and it is not. But when you look for something, you realise that there's actually all sorts of ways that that's being taught and that's being absorbed. And so I hope that's helped some of you. Again, if you've got any really good resources or ideas or ways that you teach history, then please put them in the comments below. We can just share our ideas, share what's working. Thanks for listening.